Spoken word soars in this city. I had the opportunity to sit with pillars of poetry and unpack the rich history of legendary stages. This is a story of loving the craft and creating a community whose legacy lives on.
If the cage bird sings and in the mouth must freestyle.
Remain nameless in a sea of free will abusers, or use the gift of power in your tongue to lift every voice. See, we understand that life versus death is but one choice. It's liberty that's in question. But as he said,
Who is Aman Shabazz, the artist?
I feel like my role as an artist it's what it's always been, but certainly in a current context, it's one where I am taking every opportunity to really be able to observe the conditions of the people and then convey those things that we observe. But when it comes to spoken word, even when it comes to emceeing, I don't look at that as performance in the same context. It's obviously a way to be able to connect and to communicate. And I say this with no exaggeration, it is literally a spiritual experience. It's an experience where I know unquestionably that it's not just Aman Shabazz that's speaking at that time.
Right. Tell me about the landscape of spoken word by the time that you had got into being on stage more often as a poet.
For me, if we're talking about early days, specifically in relationship to spoken word, I have to go back to the early 90s. We used to just have ciphers. Same like you do with an MC cipher, except eventually we started adding in other artists. Yeah. There were poets, there were vocalists, there were whatever it was that you did. And we'd be on the corner. There was one particular place that we used to go to in particular in DC called the Lights of the Garden. And I'll never forget, there'd be a DJ, it was like real tall stairs. They'd be on the DJ would be on the stairs, they'd be spinning whatever, and people would just go, you know what I mean? Like, we'd be in the cipher, and whatever it was you had, whether you had your poem, whether you was freestyling, whether you had your rhyme, whatever it was, you just spit. When I came back to Richmond, one of the things that I brought with me was, all right, how do we capture that here, and how do we cultivate it here? You can't talk about the development of spoken word culture without talking about the Southern Revolutionist Literary Guild. They used to have, I'll say for other purposes, open mics. It wasn't really an open mic, it was more of a showcase. But they used to have it in their apartment. And literally, when I tell you there was a line around the corner for folks to get in, they would fill up the apartment and they would do the show. And then what made it, for lack of a better term, hit the big time was when they moved the show from the apartment to, at that time, what was called the Underground Railroad, which was down in Shacklebottom. And it was incredible, just like what you know in terms of the energy of what we feel when you come to a verses or when you come to a lyric av or wherever, that's what was created. Then at one point, a really good friend of mine, Chuck Moore, he introduced me to a woman named Lorna Pinckney. She had this vision for an event that she called the Soul Kitchen and asked me would I host it. The culture that was created from verses, I think, helped move to that point where there was an explosion into a much wider appreciation, if you will, for it, and even helping to cultivate artists, if you will, out of it as well.
I said, y'all all right? I don't hear nobody. I said, are y'all all right?
When I first got there, and the culture of Tuesday Verses was, you better get there early, because you want to get your seat. Right. If you didn't get your seat, you're going to stay outside and wait, because you wanted a seat. So as people are filtering out, you're going to be outside. And luckily, Tuesday Verses it was all glass front. The outside was just as live as the inside. It was a party on the block on 2nd Street. And it was packed and full and from 7:30, 8 o'clock until 12 and after, because we were outside being a community.
The thing that was so great about Verses is we never advertised. It was always word of mouth. And as the popularity of what was happening, it helped burgeon some interest around, again, people who would just be kind of coming in. What was actually going on these Tuesdays? What are these people doing? Why are they, what are they doing with this band?
When you came to Verses, it wasn't just to perform, it was to get some love. People called it church. If you were cutting your teeth as an emerging artist, we encouraged you. So it wasn't just a showcase where you just go up and do whatever. No, we were gonna help you get better. better. And then the emerging artists coming in with the established artists saw that level of excellence, and it just wasn't local artists. They were coming from all over the world, the East Coast, up and down the East Coast, constantly just coming through. Versus already had a name by 2004. Just travels coming in. And you saw that level of excellence, and you wanted to be that. You wanted to get better, and you wanted to keep coming, and you kept coming till you got better, like you did.
No pain and injustice. Weigh a whole lot, probably not. You do a whole lot of dancing. Your legs must be strong. You know you love that. Strong leg, strong back, so you can pick a lot of cotton.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it happened. And I came in and I saw like the posts that I felt like were really established, and I saw Iman, I saw Dior, I saw Narrator. So there was these huge like names, these well-established artists, and these locals, these novice poets who were just getting started in the same room, right, and sharing the same stage. It all felt like we were like a family, and everyone was kind of on the same playing field. You know what I mean? As far as how we appreciated each other.
Yep.
Thanksgiving dinner. Let's go. But before my mother ever gets to cut the turkey, my dad and brother cut each other with insults. Ironically, it's my birthday, and my only wish is for peace, like Indians and pilgrims, but like them. One may perish way before they coexist.
So I was only into hip hop music. I didn't really know about the poetry scene. And a good friend of mine that I was performing music with, hip hop music, he was actually killed. When he was killed, I wrote a poem about his death. So I read the poem to a friend of mine, and he said, you know what, you should come to this Lyric Ave show and perform the poem. And when I came, man, I just fell in love with it. It's like, it actually changed my life and saved my life in a whole direction of where my life was going.
There was a time where it was very like, you know, this kind of very slow, you know, slow storytelling. It was these drawn out metaphors. There was no rhyme at all. How do you feel like the landscape of poetry has changed from when you first started getting into poetry, when you first got into poetry slams, to like now?
My style, I would say, is different than a lot of poets. And I feel like people were trying to get me to break out of, for many years, to not sound like me. And it's funny, everything that I was trying not to do, later on became what everybody was doing.
Yeah.
People started being these loud punchline poets. A lot of the famous poets now that are killing it are doing exactly what I was told to stop doing, and they're very successful with it, which was funny.
What Lorna created with Tuesday Verses changed the landscape of spoken word forever in Richmond, Virginia. Now, there are open mics, poetry slams, and other poetry-based events all across the city. In some way, they've all modeled themselves after Lorna's vision.
And I think one of the things about Tuesday Verses is that wasn't really a place where you were just there to be seen. Mm-hmm. You were there to be a part of the experience, right? And we, you know, she called it that over time, right? It was the Tuesday Verses experience, right? It wasn't just an open mic.
No, it was not. It was not. Tuesday Verses was very, very mindful. Nikki McMullen was very mindful. Roscoe Burnems was, we as a collective, Lorna Pinkton was very mindful to make sure everybody was heard, that the focal point at this place was the stage. And like, again, I know how poets are treated in other places where it's more music-centered or something else-centered. And that is not, and nor had ever been, the Tuesday Verses legacy.
You know, the pillars were love and community and empathy. And to your point, and I don't want to, you know, use the term elders too loosely, but you have people who were more seasoned, people who had been there, who were regulars, who were the staples, now educating the new people so that they came in with the right energy, you know, right, the right vibe, you know what I mean? And they didn't misconstrue what this was supposed to be, you know what I mean? And that, I think, is the legacy that had continued on throughout the years that Lorna had set the tone for.
Absolutely.
I'm eternally grateful for that, because that's, you know, Tuesday Verses is where like I really like hone my craft. And I mean, I don't know if there would be a Roscoe Burnems if there wasn't a Lorna or a Tuesday Verses. So I can't thank you enough. You know I love you. So like, thank you for just taking your time to do this.
I feel so lonely over here. You're welcome.
I appreciate you.